Okay, let's see if it'll go.
Take some video. You want me to push the button? You want
Yeah.
to push the button? Gavin, you're the...
I'll be over here with a laptop.
Okay, let me get the video going here. Just
Yep. Let's see if it'll go.
push it on.
Right, so the current problem is that the cooling system doesn't want to cooperate. As you can see, we've managed to blow a hole in this little water tank that sits on the back side of the engine. So somebody else put this engine in this car, and the way they routed the water system, yeah, leaves a little to be desired. So currently we're removing the thermostat to try and get it to circulate water to the radiator, because we managed to blow that tank apart by running the engine with the bleeder fitting out of the radiator, and it blew the tank apart in the back and never put any water out of the bleeder in the front through this hose that was wide open to atmosphere, which makes us feel like the two aren't connected through some means, and the only obvious thing is the thermostat. This is the old heat it up with a heat gun trick. Get the thermostat to open, and then you jam aspirin between here and here, 2 or 3 of them all the way around. And the aspirin will keep the valve open so that the water will bleed through. And then once you get the system bled, the aspirin will dissolve, and then it'll work like a normal thermostat again. The way the cooling system is done on this car, they've got the pump inlet down there. And if you look, there's a little line coming off of it, leaving the pump inlet or leading to the pump inlet. And then they've got a line coming off the side of the block over here. Both of those go back to this water tank. One feeds into the bottom, one feeds into the side. The trouble is, with the thermostat in place, it's too easy for the cooling system to circulate water back through the tank and back to the pump and not move it all the way to the front of the car through the radiator and make it come back. So I think that's our major cooling system problem. We ballpark franked this water tank because it got hot and it got pressure in it, blew itself apart. So we got to work on that. But once we got rid of the thermostat so that it could circulate to the front, it actually acts like a normal car. So I think the solution is to restrict the water feed, which normally would go to the heater core, to that little water tank so that it'll force it to push water to the front. That, and I'm not sure you need a thermostat in it anyway. Next problem. See how it's trimming 15 into one bank and 15 out of the other? Well, this is actually one bank of the engine. There are 2 groups of 3 cylinders. So what's going on is it's trimming fuel all the way out of one set of 3 and all the way into the other set of 3. Quick swap lambda sensor holes. Revs up pretty good. So these things are sitting there idle, and you got 2 ECUs, left side, right side. They're 2 separate plenums. So this is bank 1 and this is bank 2. I paused the data here. You can see what the idle speed's at 1020. Manifold pressure is 18.8 and the throttle position is 1.5. Now they're separate individual butterflies drive-by-wire, but this bank, same RPM, same throttle blade angle, different manifold pressure. So the initial thought was, well, it must be that the airflow is different between the 2 throttle bodies. Of course, unless I said there's a manifold leak somewhere in the plenum. Well, turns out there's a fitting over here. This one had tape on it, so this is the one that had 20 kPa. And look over here, they forgot to put anything on it, so it just got a leak straight to atmosphere, which explains the difference in the manifold pressure. Next issue seems to be the lift pumps, which are basically these 2 Bosch pumps here, which deadhead together into this rail and then each one feeds one high pressure pump on the engine. But the problem is it's doing some completely weird shit with the fuel pressure. And I feel like we'd be a lot better off just putting a regulator and return style system in it, because because I think it's overheating the fuel that's trying to send to the engine. You can see the pressure drop and the control goes crazy trying to get it back. Yeah, so in the end, we got the cooling system thing figured out by getting rid of the thermostat, which I think was literally just blocking the flow to the rest of the cooling system from the engine. It's bypassing going through that tank, and it's easier for the system to bypass through the heater core output than it is to go to the tank, to the radiator in the front of the car. So it's just short circuiting, and it never gets the water to the thermostat to warm it up so it'll open, so it's never can get rid of the air and use the radiator. So they've got to fix the water tank, which we know, but we've now run it for several hours with the cap off the water tank and with the thermostat out so it can circulate water through the cooling system, and it doesn't seem to have a problem. So now we've got everything else worked out other than the deadheaded fuel pumps, the lift pumps. So we're going to change that to a return style regulator tomorrow, and then stick the thing on the dyno and see what it'll do. It sounds great so far, so that's good news. Day 3, we're over here at RM Motorsports. The fuel pressure regulator just showed up from Summit. So they're installing that for the lift pump system so that it's using a return style system, and hopefully we don't have the pressure problems feeding the main high pressure pumps if we use that setup. A little bit of a miscommunication on the cooling system. We need a restrictor going to that water tank at the back of the engine so it can't just circulate water through there and not push it through the radiator. But they put the restrictor in between the engine and the radiator, so that's being removed and remedied, and then we'll be able to start it up, then stick it over on the dyno. It's got most of the bodywork back on it, so see how we get on today. Looks a lot more like a car today. Got some wheels on it, a bit more bodywork, or bodywork at all. It's slowly turning into a car. We're checking the regulator out to figure out why it's leaking fuel. Seems like it's all right, doesn't it?
Yeah, now it does.
It was leaking sooner than this before. So just the bolts weren't tight between the top and the bottom as it came out of the box. So it's pissing fuel out between the top and the bottom. It's definitely low. I'm not sure it even makes my waist. Not even at the top of the roll hoop.
What?
Start her up. So current problem, we go to make a dyno pull and the one side ECU is losing the crank trigger. Well, I of course adjust the settings and play with it, and then we go to start it and it won't start. It's losing the crank trigger the entire time, but so is the other side. So it turns out, and I have the guy that built the harness here wiggle on the connector on the crank trigger while it's not running, and we get change in voltage while it's not running. He's just wiggling on the connector. The voltage is jumping around. So there's a broken wire. We need to fix that. So we'll try that and then try again. That's where we give it the wiggle test, and you can see the voltage changing when he's wiggling the connector, but the engine's not running. A little bit of weirdness going on. I'm afraid there might be a little bit of a ground loop situation going on. We've got one ECU grounded to the cylinder head and the other ECU grounded to the other cylinder head, and there's just a little bit of weird shit going on. So ended up being water in the crank sensor connector, so it's not a broken wire. That's nice. But there's still, I feel like there's some funkiness going on. So I'm gonna have them tie the two grounds together. We'll start with that and see if that helps. First clue, it's making power. The absorbers are smoking. All right, so here's our first power pull to 7,000. See, it has a super flat torque curve all the way from 3,000 where we're starting on up to 7,000. I mean, it's over 400 for almost that entire range. And the power is peaking right now about 68, 6,900 at 530. But I don't think it's done yet. Maybe it is. It's got a little bit different header system on it, obviously, than stock, and definitely the intake is different with this sort of snorkel thing it's got here that has to fit through the bodywork. So it's not unexpected that it wouldn't make quite the power that the OEM would with all of the parts that the OEM 1 engine had on it in the car. So we just did an air-fuel ratio sweep, started at 86 lambda, then ran 93, then 90, then 95, then 90 again because it looked the best, then 88, and then 86. And so we have graphs up here of 90, 88, 86, and 95 lambda, and everything except 95 lays in the same trace, which shows that it's not super concerned, this engine, with mixture. Quick look at the spark plug out of this thing. This is straight off the dyno, so doesn't look terrible. So far, so good. We've sort of investigated the total ignition timing that it wants here and kind of found the happy spot. So it's making about, like, I think 565-ish to the rear wheel. So now it's just about driving it around on the dyno and making sure that it's happy. At the top of the pull, like, the manifold pressure trace starts dropping down as it's running out of airflow. I'm sure those little snorkels are restricting the airflow on the way to the engine. So, I mean, you're losing a couple of percent just because it's pulling into a vacuum because of the inlet tubes. So the last pulls we did were real low RPM stuff, like 2,000 RPM to 4,000 RPM. That's the area where the cams are fully advanced, and it's really easy to get the mixture wrong in that area because you have a lot of bypass between the intake and the exhaust when the throttle's wide open, particularly with all the cam advance we're running. So what you do is you get the mixture close, and then you move the mixture up and down to figure out what makes the best torque. And you can see we made a tiny little increase in torque, but importantly, it at least runs at a correct mixture, doesn't blow black smoke, and takes the throttle good. So if he's taking off from a stop, jumps on the throttle, it doesn't just die. So the last bit here was just driving it around on the dyno, looking for holes in the map, or, you know, move the throttle to all different positions, open, closed, cruise, part throttle, slow lift off the throttle like the guy's gonna drive it. And you're looking for a spot where it doesn't want to take the throttle good or hesitates or does anything wrong, and obviously couldn't find anything there. So that's gonna be pretty much it for today's dyno session. Ended up at about 560 rear wheel horsepower, and we're in a calm and sort of conservative tune because in the end, this is a vintage race car. We're not trying to set the world on fire. What we'd rather do is have the engine be plenty safe and not break itself, and give him a chance to go play with his toy. So that's going to be the end for day, what is this, 3 or 4? Day 3, I guess, at RM Motorsports with the Ferrari FF V12. Off we go. So it's day 4 here with the Ferrari. We've been working on cold start, which isn't really fucking awesome. It like wants to like chug a little bit. Part of it is that it doesn't have direct injection pressure right when it first starts. I'm not exactly sure why that is. It takes it a minute before it gets it. Then it starts and it chugs for a minute and then it goes. Blows a little bit of black smoke, so we're trying to get rid of that. And just looking at anything else like idle control, whatever else, trying to make it good. It's once it gets warm, it's really happy. It's just when it's cold, it's not super happy, and it's kind of annoying that it's not. But customers coming to look at the car here shortly, so we're trying to get ready for that. All right, give it a shot. Go ahead. Right, so today we didn't really get a chance yesterday to play with injection timing at all, so we thought we wanted to investigate that a little bit today before we're completely finished. So I've got Gavin Moore here with me from RM Motorsport. He's the one that built the harness for the engine, and he's actually the guy that's in charge of controlling the dyno. So Gavin, we made 3 pulls back to back this morning with 2 different injection timings. We started with what we had been running yesterday, and then we made an adjustment where I actually backed the injection event up closer towards intake valve close, or closer towards top dead center, and then we made a pull that way, and then we put it back to how we started, so it was an ABA test. Which ones are we looking at here on the screen?
So over here, we actually have, like you said, 3 pulls graphed back to back. The top lines, the peak power lines, are going to be the first run and the last run with the injection timing the same as it was yesterday. This bottom line down here is going to be the one where we advanced the ignition time, or the injection timing, and the difference in power was like 30 horsepower up here at the top end.
Right. In all fairness, I actually retarded the injection event closer towards where the valve closes, but clearly the engine didn't like it, so you really couldn't tell any difference as far as how it ran listening to it, but the old dyno never lies. All right, so that's basically going to do it here from RM Motorsport. We investigated the injection timing being further advanced from where we had been running it as a baseline. But part of the problem with trying to do engine development on a chassis dyno is you've got lots of things that influence the horsepower between the crankshaft and the axle where you're measuring. And so we did an ABA test again, standard injection timing, advanced the injection timing, and then back to standard, and it picked up power when we moved the injection timing, and then we put it back and it picked up power again. So we're dealing with something warming up in the driveline, like probably the gearbox or whatever. So once again, that's why you use an engine dyno to develop the engine, not necessarily a chassis dyno. It takes some effort on a chassis dyno to get rid of those errors. But what's cool is the owner just showed up. and it made the most power it's made the whole time. It made 570, so everybody's thrilled. It's exciting, it runs great, he's happy, and so job done.